Donald Trump is about to sign an executive order that might finally end the global attack on our savings accounts. This article is literally blowing up in the Wall Street Journal this week because it looks as if America might be going down a different path to the rest of the West. Of course, we're talking about the UK. They just passed a law earlier in the week that might end free speech for the first time in 140 years in the UK. This is why we're seeing the search trends for VPNs explode in the Great British Empire. And then, of course, this came out this week. Mexico is out there launching biometric IDs while Trump is threatening new tariffs. And let's also not forget what the EU is doing right now. They're supposed to be launching a central bank digital currency in about 50 days' time, and Ursula von der Leyen is openly talking about the need for a digital ID. All of this has happened in the past week. We have a lot to dive into. Nico, I think the first place to start things with is probably breaking down what is going on with this new executive order that Donald Trump might be signing. I think there's a lot to talk about with this, and I think we got a lot to dive into.
Absolutely, man. And first of all, shout out to the GOAT, Luke Mikic, hosting the show today, off with the hook. But I do want to cover this because this is something I believe that a lot of people have experienced over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years all over the West. We all know the Canadian truckers protest here in the United States. Again, I don't want to get into specific politics and political parties, but certain political groups were unbanked because of their political beliefs, including President Trump. Eric Trump actually talked a lot about that, how he saw his father get unbanked left and right. And again, this is a political candidate. This was someone who was running for president. So essentially the financial system was getting weaponized towards people that have certain political beliefs. It seems like the Trump administration, as he promised during the Nashville conference, is finally ending that. So it's a two-pronged attack, right? You have Senator Cynthia Lummis basically calling out the Fed, saying, hey, Operation Choke Point 2.0, what are you guys doing? It's a black hole. We can't get answers from you. And then from the executive branch, Donald Trump coming in and saying, listen, it's over. The discrimination against certain political groups has to come to an end. And it seems like that's what's happening. So check out this Wall Street Journal article for the audio listeners. White House preps order to punish banks that discriminate against conservatives. The White House is preparing to step up pressure against big banks over perceived discrimination against conservatives. Here's a key part. And crypto companies, with an executive order that threatens to fine lenders that drop customers for political reasons. A draft of the executive order, which was viewed by the Wall Street Journal, directs bank regulators to investigate whether any financial institutions might have violated the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, antitrust laws, or consumer financial protection laws. Violators could be subject to monetary penalties, consent decrees, or other disciplinary measures, according to the draft. The order could be signed as soon as this week, according to people familiar with the matter. It is possible the order could get delayed or that the administration's plans will change. The draft order doesn't name any specific banks, but appears to refer to an incident where Bank of America was accused of shutting down the accounts of a Christian organization operating in Uganda based on the organization's religious beliefs. The bank has said it closed the accounts because it doesn't serve small businesses operating outside the U.S. The draft also criticizes the role that some banks played in an investigation into what happened during the riots at the Capitol. And it continues to say, When asked about the journal's report on the draft order in a CNBC interview Tuesday, President Trump recounted his own experiences being dropped as a bank customer, including at JP Morgan Chase. The banks discriminated against me very badly, and I was very good to the banks. A JP Morgan spokeswoman said that the bank doesn't close accounts for political reasons and that it agreed with Trump that regulatory change is needed. I mean, that's like kind of saying, hey, we don't take fault in this, but yeah, I think the regulations are necessary. And I'll just kind of rip off the veil here. They acted so politically. I mean, we had Caitlin Long on the show a couple of weeks ago. She said, and I quote, the order to deny her bank, the Custodia Bank, the federal banking charter, which would make her competitive with other big banks, came directly from the White House of the Biden administration. So, I mean, is it too much of a stretch to believe and to see? I remember multiple, and I worked at some of these companies, they were straight up debanked because they were Bitcoin on-ramps, right? So yes, this is complete discrimination based on your political beliefs, based on your beliefs in general, based on your beliefs in money. And it seems like it's finally coming to an end. But I think the part that rubs me the wrong way a little bit here is the fact that they're not taking full responsibility. They're saying, oh no, we didn't do it for those reasons, but regulation is necessary. So it's like, we did it. We're not going to take responsibility for it, but we're going to try to fix it. I don't like that at all. And it goes on to say, banks have been on the edge about potential action by the Trump administration. The Journal reported in June that the administration was considering an executive order. Conservatives for years have accused banks of denying them services on political or religious grounds, and cryptocurrency companies have said they were shut out of banking services under the Biden administration. Banks, for their part, have said their decisions are driven by legal, regulatory, or financial risks, including those stemming from the U.S. anti-money laundering laws, which we've talked about a lot on Simply Bitcoin, how those AML laws get weaponized to go after certain political opponents. Remember what happened during the Canadian truckers' protest, right? A lot of people's accounts just got frozen, right? They literally just got frozen. Those people were peacefully protesting, and Bitcoiners were included in this as well, because a lot of people, since the accounts were frozen, they started using Bitcoin as a way to raise funds, and then those people were persecuted as well. So again, I don't believe we should live in a world where you should get persecuted. Your bank should be shut down based on your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, and your beliefs about money. I don't think we should live in that world. These are the same politicians, the same banks that are also asking for central bank digital currencies. With the central bank digital currency, they wouldn't even have to ask. They would just ban it outright. They would just freeze it outright. There is no bank to call, right? And that is absolutely dystopian. That is absolutely terrifying. So I'm really, really glad this administration is doing something about it. Elections have consequences, like we've been saying for the past year or so. Luke.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I want to share. So you mentioned it, Nico. You mentioned the Canadian truckers and them having their bank accounts frozen. I think that's absolutely horrifying, but I want to show the guys an article of what's actually happening in China. So again, most people know that the Canadian Freedom truckers, they had bank accounts frozen. I just found this right now. It's kind of interesting. One woman's bank account was frozen for buying a Freedom Convoy t-shirt. Imagine that. You can't even buy a t-shirt online without your bureaucrats freezing your bank accounts. And again, what I think is really interesting is we tweeted this out from the Simply Bitcoin Twitter account. Christine Lagarde, in a recent interview, was openly praising China's central bank digital currency. She was saying it's a success for everyone, and it's not just for the elites. It's for everyone. It's doing great. So they're kind of trying to paint this picture of a CBDC being an innovation. Okay, they're saying, look, yes, traditional bank accounts, they're slow. The bankers charge you a 2 to 3% fee. Trust us at the central bank. We're going to market and go direct to consumer with these CBDCs. And Nico, I find it fascinating that Christine Lagarde is openly praising China's CBDC, and we know that China's digital yuan comes with an expiration date. So this kind of ties into this bigger theme that we're starting to see with Europe and them talking about the fact that they want to confiscate savings. Again, this is a really scary topic, especially with what is going on with the UK right now. But again, we also talked about this last week. This is a blog post from the European Central Bank. Look at the date here, 27th of June 2025. They directly said there is now an urgent need to channel retail savings into European capital markets to finance EU priorities. Again, we've been speculating here for a little while at Simply Bitcoin. What is a European central bank digital currency going to look like? Why is the ECB openly publishing articles like this on their official website, saying there is an urgent need to channel retail savings into European capital markets? I just think this central bank digital currency is probably going to come with an expiration date, like what we saw in China, and potentially a whole lot more. But Nico, I want your thoughts on this topic. What do you think? Am I just being a little bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist here, or
not at all? And I will say, like for the last 4 years or so, a lot of the so-called conspiracy theorists have happened to be proven more correct and more right than a lot of these, legacy media authoritative voices, right? So I don't think this is a conspiracy theory at all. And what I will say is we've heard Christine Lagarde talk about Bitcoin. We've heard her say that Bitcoin is an escape valve. We've heard the European Central Bank say, if we don't establish central bank digital currencies, we are going to lose control, right? We've heard her say that, right? What worries me the most is the West should not be trying to emulate the CCP and China, right? That is a dictatorship. That is a country that does not have the same ideals, the same freedoms that the West has. We should not be trying to emulate that as a society, right? So which brings me to the thing that I always make the case for, which is we really have two futures ahead of us. We have the future of Bitcoin, and then we have the future of central bank digital currencies. There is no in between, because the continuation of fiat are central bank digital currencies. And what central bank digital currencies are going to enable the state and the governments to do is completely dystopian. You're talking about tying your money to your ID, tying your money to a social credit system. If you talk against the government, if you say something negatively towards the government, they freeze your account. This has already happened before. This is not just us speculating. They freeze your account. They bar your ability to buy tickets to travel. They take away your ability to perhaps put your kid in a better school or to get access to better healthcare. Like, that is the system of which Europe wants. Europe wants to go down that path, and they're signaling that by their hostility towards Bitcoin with the MiCA laws, the MiCA regulations. And they're really like trying to close the door on people's ability to take self-custody. That's how I'm perceiving it as a Bitcoiner here in the US. And also their continued push for these central bank digital currencies. And another thing that I'll add as well is, Luke, you pronounced it so beautifully, so I'm going to ask you to pronounce her name. But, the head of the European Union, she is not elected, right? She's not elected, Mrs. Ursula. She's not elected, right? And she holds a tremendous amount of power. So, again, we always hear about, the importance of democracy, and we get lectured about it. And I'm a big fan. But simultaneously, it's from how I perceive it, it's democracy as long as it goes in a certain direction. That's how I'm perceiving this whole situation.
Yeah, you and me both. And this is the lady, Ursula von der Leyen. I think she's caused a little bit of controversy recently because she's out there openly tweeting about the need to mobilize private capital and convert this into European priorities. We can see we also need to mobilize private capital. I mean, I might just be reading in between the lines here, Nico, but that screams like we need to use a CBDC to confiscate your savings, and we're going to use it to do what we want. I mean, this is, maybe I'm paraphrasing incorrectly here, but they're openly writing blog articles saying there is an urgent need to channel retail savings that's yours and that's my saving account into European priorities. I mean, I just think they're saying the quiet parts out loud. And it's not just Christine Lagarde. It's not just Ursula von der Leyen. It's everyone in the Europe zone, okay? There are so many people in Europe playing the same kind of game. Again, we've got France implementing citizenship-based taxation. They're openly trying to push this through Parliament right now. We've got Spain talking about wealth taxes, and it just really looks as if the Eurozone, I want to be careful with what I say, but maybe they're just being infected with a little bit of collectivist ideology. And it looks as if Trump is kind of maybe swinging back the other way with this new executive order, which is why I think we're both so bullish on America, Nico.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, the European Union news is straight up dystopian. Like, I mean, the wording that they're saying is absolutely crazy. Like, they're basically saying, like, we want to have the ability to tap into your savings. So think about that for a second. Like, you work your butt off, you pay your taxes, you're a good citizen, and essentially bureaucrats in Brussels are basically saying that's not enough. We also need to have the ability to tap in to your private savings to get those private savings to work. Like, that is utterly insane. Like, why are you getting to determine what I can and cannot do with my savings? That's insane. On top of inflation, on top of the tax, on top of property tax, on top of sales tax, on top of the VAT, now you want to control my savings as well. Like, that is gnarly. That is crazy, right? And this is why I love the move from Trump. Trump's basically saying, like, look, like, we're done with this persecution of a specific political group. It's over. It's done. We're putting pressure on banks. Those banks it's interesting how they phrased it. It's like, we take no responsibility, but change is necessary. So they're basically indicating, yes, we're willing to change, but we're also not going to take blame, right? So, however, I'll leave it with this. Bitcoin fixes this, because here's the thing. It's swinging towards conservatives this time. But if you look back like 50, 60, 70 years ago in the United States, it was swinging towards the left. The left was the one being persecuted, right? So what Bitcoiners are making the case for is no one should be able to control the money and no one should be able to print money, right? It should be a neutral system, rules without rulers, and that's how the system should operate, right? And that's the case that Bitcoiners are making for. That's the world that I want to live in. The people that don't want you to live in the world, they don't want you to live in that type of world. They're the people that are advocating for central bank digital currencies. And it's a dystopia. And history has shown it. History has shown what happens when governments accumulate too much power. They weaponize that towards the people, and that's something that we've experienced during Operation Choke Point 2.0. Bitcoiners didn't give a flying F about politics. We didn't care. We were not interested. It was just like, oh, like, it doesn't matter. We're building. But it wasn't until the last administration with Operation Choke Point 2.0 that it galvanized our industry. It literally forced our industry into a corner to throw our political hat in the ring so that our industry wouldn't disappear off the face of the earth, because that's what they were trying to do. Now you have to ask yourself, why were they trying to do that? They were trying to do that, to use Elizabeth Warren's own words, is because they want a central bank digital currency. And the thing is, when people have a choice between a CBDC and Bitcoin. They're going to choose Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin, a CBDC doesn't solve two fundamental issues that Bitcoin solves. A CBDC doesn't solve inflation. That's number one. Number two, a CBDC doesn't solve censorship. That might not be that big of a deal for you if you live in the West. But if you live in the global South, if you live in a country that lives under a dictatorship or has a relatively unstable fiat currency, so the government is more likely to roll out capital controls, it's extremely important to use a money that is censorship resistant, right? So yeah, this is a crazy, crazy time that we're heading into, that we're living into. But I mean, we've been talking about this, right? That we witnessed the disintermediation of media with the rise of social media. It allows people like Luke and I to make content and talk directly to you guys. But what we're about to start living through, my prediction over the next 5 to 10 years, is the disintermediation of money. And more people are going to start to opt out, and they're going to start to pick and choose which money they want to use. And of course, I think Bitcoin is the best one, and that's why I think numbers are going to continue to go up. Luke? I think you're muted, my friend.
I'm muted. What I was saying, thanks for catching me there, Nico, was I agree, number will continue to go up. And like we kind of teased in the introduction, this isn't, this whole attack and fight that I think is going on over savings and, whether you are allowed to save or not. This isn't just Donald Trump potentially signing an executive order on this topic this week. I also wanted to share this with you guys. We also saw that Hester Peirce, of course, at this SEC, is now calling for modern financial privacy in the, let's just call that the Bitcoin era. I scrolled down and I found that she was speaking this week at a conference just yesterday. So this is August 4th. And what I found really interesting was she emphasized the necessity of modernizing outdated regulatory frameworks, particularly the Bank Secrecy Act and the third-party doctrine to align with technological advancements. So maybe it's not just a Donald Trump talking point. Maybe it's not just him recognizing that Europe is going after our savings. Maybe it's Hester Peirce and Donald Trump. Maybe this is something that the entire Trump administration is going to lean into. Maybe they recognize the fact that people in America want financial sovereignty. Maybe they just want to have a little bit of sovereignty over their money. Donald Trump did infamously ban or outlaw CBDCs on, was it one of the first days he got into office, Nico?
Yep. That was a specific executive order that was issued by the Trump administration that essentially was stopping the momentum that, and this was very insidious what the previous administration was trying to do, because clearly there wasn't a general consensus approval for CBDCs. Right? So what they were trying to do is that they were trying to slow down the Bitcoin industry, and they were trying to basically put these CBDCs in through the back door. So when Trump got into office, one of his first executive orders that were also not only ending Operation Choke Point 2.0, but it also specifically forbade the United States government to launch a central bank digital currency. Also, on the state level, multiple states have passed laws, like the state of Florida, that specifically forbid the launch of central bank digital currency. So shout out to Hester Peirce. Again, this is the fight ahead of us, ladies and gentlemen. I think Opti pulled up a meme earlier on in the show, basically showing the two roads ahead of us. We got, the road that's, heading into the sunlight, heading into peace and prosperity. Thank you, Luke, which is Bitcoin. And then we have the CBDC road, which is just fiat on steroids, right? It's going to empower the government even more than it is empowered now.
Yeah, I think it really is as simple as that, Nico. You normally say, what is it? Slavery or
Bitcoin or slavery, bro. It literally comes down to that. That's really what it comes down to.
Which way, Western man? I do think it's interesting that Donald Trump looks to be one of the few leaders around the world actually banning, straight out banning CBDCs. If we actually have a look at, I've got a little bit of a tracker here that has a look at which countries around the world are implementing CBDCs. What's kind of horrifying is the large majority of the world's economic power is launching a CBDC. All of these colors on the map, if they're not red, you should be horrified, because the countries that are highlighted in red have cancelled a CBDC. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't see many countries. I can see Ecuador has cancelled a CBDC. Nico, I find it interesting that the government has, well, I need to be careful what I say. Let's just say that there's a lot of gangs taking over control in Ecuador right now. Maybe ask yourself why when you consider they're one of the few countries here without a CBDC. That's just a question. Kenya has also cancelled a CBDC, and it looks as if the only other country is Fiji. And now, of course, we've got America. We've got Donald Trump openly banning CBDCs, and then it looks as if the rest of the world is openly trying to create one. This is what I find really concerning. There's another website that looks at this that actually shows that from memory, it's 98% of the globe's GDP is right now investigating launching a CBDC. So this is another map. What I like about this map is it shows 137 countries representing 98% of global GDP is exploring a CBDC. So this isn't like just a China thing. This isn't just a one-off with Canada freezing bank accounts. This isn't just, the UK recently attacking free speech with their, Online Safety Act. This is a trend. It looks as if it's accelerating. We talked about this earlier in the week. Mexico is rolling out biometric IDs. I find that a real head scratcher, especially considering they're trying to call it voluntary. Again, we all know how these voluntary measures begin, Nico. It starts out as voluntary, and then, of course, a crisis, whether it's manufactured or not, emerges, and that voluntary measure, once it has the infrastructure put into place, is then made mandatory. And again, this kind of thing really concerns me, and it's just another one of these dominoes that has seemed to fall in the past week. So again, it's not just, isolated headlines that has us kind of, with the hairs on the back of our neck standing up, so to say. It's how these things are accelerating that, has me paying very close attention to what these globalists are doing and saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that slow creep that people have to pay attention to, because I think that's where most people, because that's how these things happen, right? Like when they roll out these laws, like going back to 1913, right, with the establishment of the income tax in the U.S., when that was sold to the American people, they specifically said that the income tax wasn't going to be more than 1% to 3%. They specifically said that it was only going to be targeted for the rich. Fast forward, right? 100 years later, 50 years later, the top tax bracket went up to 90%, right? And now, if you're in the middle class, you're paying I think it's 20 to 25 to 30% of your income. But it was sold to the American people as 1% to 3%. I'll give you another example. During the Bank Secrecy Act in 1970, when they essentially every $10,000 transaction or more had to be reported to the government, if you adjust for inflation, $10,000 in 1970 is the equivalent of $80,000 today. That number didn't move. And during the previous administration, there was a bill that was introduced to Congress that specifically said that we want to monitor every transactions $600 or above. That was shut down. But just to kind of give you an example of the creep, that slow regulatory creep that Luke is referring to. So what really worries me a little bit right now is you're starting to see social media platforms and platforms in general like Spotify and other platforms that are basically making the case that, hey, you need to identify yourself before you use the platform. Their justification is to check your age. But we all know how that's going to end up. It's going to be with age first, and then it's going to be a general requirement. Now you have to ask yourself, why is this phenomenon happening? It's happening because less and less people are consuming their media from the legacy media. In fact, they don't really believe in the legacy media anymore. So they're starting to consume their media on alternative platforms. And that makes it a lot more difficult for the state governments in general to control the narrative, right? And this is why they want people to identify themselves, because if people identify themselves to these platforms, what's going to happen is what happened in China. People decide to self-censor because they fear that, oh my God, I can get my money shut off. I might not be able to take my kid to a certain school. I might not be able to travel. So what do people do? They censor themselves. You can't have freedom without privacy. I would say anonymity. There's a reason Satoshi disappeared. There's a reason he left. There's a reason no one knows his identity, right? So you can't have freedom without privacy. And what's happening right now is privacy is becoming villainized. And they're trying to convince the world that the world is not safe unless everyone knows everyone's identity. And of course, that creates a honeypot. There's been countless examples of those honeypots being breached, and all your data just gets online, right? Whether it's the Equifax leak, whether it's like leak after leak after leak. Coinbase had a leak. I think Ledger had a leak, right? Then you had all your information online, and then you were getting all these spam calls, and the people knew your name. Like no, you don't. The world used to work, right, where people used to be able to transact privately, and everything ran just fine, right? So this is just a quintessential example of a power grab using the boogeyman, using, oh my God, like the world's going to combust if you don't comply. That's really what's happening right now.
You mentioned the slippery slope, Nico. I think that's really interesting, especially as an Australian watching what's unfolding right now in my home country. Right now, Australia is trying to pass this 30% unrealized gains on retirement accounts. So that's 3 million Australian dollars. And that works out to be like 1.6 million US dollars. So it's really not a ton of money. But the way that this is getting framed is, oh, look, this is just going to impact less than 1% of families in Australia. Even the mainstream media is saying, look, just the billionaires are slamming this new $3 million superannuation tax change. And it is true that it is only going to be affecting 80,000 households right now. But again, like you said, Nico, with the US federal income tax, it might only affect 80,000 people right now. But with inflation doing what inflation is doing, especially in Australia, this is all of a sudden going to be impacting a lot more than just 80,000 people. This is eventually probably going to be affecting 50% of people. Again, Aussie homes have gone from, I think it's something like $200,000 in 1973 to 2.1 million in 2025. Just extrapolate that trend out another 10 or 15 years, and the large majority of people, so not 80,000, but probably millions of people are going to be forced to comply with this idiotic 30% unrealized capital gains taxes on their superannuation accounts. And what I think they're creating here, Nico, is the perpetual hamster wheel. Even if you buy the right things in your retirement account, they're not going to let you retire because they're going to cap your upside. Like a 30% gain it's a lot. It's a lot to be stealing when you're already paying 40% income tax. You're already paying property taxes. You're already paying land taxes, all these other levies that you pay to the government in Australia. And now they want a 30% take of what's actually in your retirement account. That's what scares me the most. people work so hard to avoid, not avoid, but people work so hard to actually put money in their savings or in their retirement accounts because they have to dodge all of those first taxes, the land taxes, the property taxes, and the 50% income taxes. And now, even if you avoid that jugular, so to say, you've still got to pay a 30% tax on your retirement accounts. This is insane. This is a slippery slope. And again, I think this is why we obviously think Bitcoin is a solution to all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin is a solution. Bitcoin is a solution to kind of opt out of this madness, because that's really how I'm interpreting it. And I never forget the conversation that I had with Jeff Booth, and the way that he frames it is like, Nico, like the fiat system has to be based on coercion because the base layer of it is fundamentally based on theft. And what do I mean by that? Like, it might sound like an exaggeration what I just said, but if you just break it down, right? So there's a social contract for taxes. There's a social contract for property tax. We've all agreed on those things, as a collective society, right? For better or for worse, but we've agreed to them. They're laws, right? You have to follow it. You don't want to break the law. But what people have not agreed to is the money tax, the inflation tax, the debasement tax. We've never agreed to that. No one has ever agreed to that. And how politicians treat it is like, it's like as if it's a part of nature. It's like as if, for some reason, money has to lose purchasing power in order to function. And that's the thing. It doesn't need to lose purchasing power in order for it to function. That's what Bitcoin proves. So how do you get people to go along with a system that debases your savings or steals from you? You have to coerce people into that said system. And the more system, the more the system breaks, the more the system causes more and more wealth inequality, the more the system takes the opportunity away from the younger generations, the more people will seek an alternative. And that's what's happening with Bitcoin. And that's why, to use Christine Lagarde's own words, that's why people are seeking the escape valve. If fiat was so fantastic, if the legacy system was working perfectly, Bitcoin wouldn't exist. Bitcoin was a direct response to what Satoshi knew the central bankers were going to do. In the Genesis block, it literally says, and I'm paraphrasing here, Chancellor, on the brink of the second bailout for banks. Bitcoin was a direct response to monetary debasement. That's what Bitcoin was for. So again, as governments continue to move forward with this coercive system, they don't have a choice but to force people in. Because if people had a choice between the two systems, they're obviously going to choose Bitcoin. I'll give you guys an example, like an actual case study that happened. I believe it was Nigeria, right, that launched one of the first CBDCs. It was called the e-Naira. It was a complete and total catastrophe. It was a fail. No one wanted to adopt it. Why? Because it didn't solve the inflation problem, and it didn't solve the censorship problem. You know what they did? They arrested a Binance executive in Nigeria. Was Binance causing people not to adopt the e-Naira or the local fiat currency? No. The only thing Binance was doing was Binance was providing an off-ramp so that people could get out of the e-Naira into something like Bitcoin. So instead of governments reacting with like, okay, guys, we got to be like responsible with the money, because if not, like, people are just going to opt out. This is why you're seeing such mass scale adoption of stablecoins in the global south, because people are like, you know what? Like, I don't feel like dealing with the Bolivar. I don't feel like dealing with the peso. I want something that's more stable. So what do they say? Okay, like, these stablecoins look great. You know what the next step is after stablecoin adoption? It's Bitcoin adoption, because they're going to come to a realization that, hey, you know what? Like, these stable coins aren't so stable, right? So yeah, listen, all roads lead to Bitcoin. Governments have no choice but to become more and more and more dystopian, more and more tyrannical, because that's the only way people are going to willingly use their system. And what Bitcoiners are advocating for is a system based on incentives. Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO. Bitcoin doesn't have a state that's backing it. It literally has an incentive structure so that people adopt it because they want to adopt it because it's better money. And I'll give you a great example of perhaps not Bitcoin being adopted, but the incentive structure that Bitcoin creates. So when the CCP banned Bitcoin mining within their borders, 50% of the Bitcoin hash rate disappeared overnight. Within 9 months, without any central party or CEO or authority, the hash rate recovered. And now the hash rate is making all-time highs. So the hash rate decentralized in the process without any central authority telling miners to plug in those miners. The Bitcoin network created an incentive structure, the difficulty dropped, that incentivized entrepreneurs to say, hey, guess what, guys? There's literally 50% more rewards on the table. Let's go set up mining operations. That's an incentive-based model. The fiat system is a coercive-based model. My money is on incentives versus coercion. Luke, you're muted, my friend.
I could not agree more. I think I've got a couple of interesting charts that show that even the incredibly powerful Chinese collectivist state couldn't even ban Bitcoin mining. They obviously tried in 2021 with this little chart here. You can see mysteriously 6 months after the China Bitcoin mining ban in March 2021, hash rate started popping back up online. And I saw this recently come out in early 2025. It looks as if Chinese pools are still dominating. This chart shows as of July 2024, Chinese pools still represent 55% of the hash rate. Again, differentiations need to be made. A pool is not necessarily indicative of hash power. But I think like this conversation here, the big battle that is being fought is over our money. If we can't speak freely over the internet, what makes you think they're going to let you transact freely over the internet? Or what makes you think they're even going to allow you to save and store money? This isn't the best chart, but it shows all of the authoritarian regimes around the world. Again, there's 4 billion people around the world living under an authoritarian regime. And again, countries not counted in the 4 billion people living under totalitarian, control. Countries like Canada. Canada was voted what? The 5th most democratic country around the world, but you still can't participate in a freedom convoy without having your bank account closed in the great democratic country of Canada. So I think this really goes to show, look, globally, there is a war over whether you can actually earn your own money and speak freely on the internet. Nico, I've got so much more to cover, but I might hold back some of the stuff for the next segment of the show. And maybe we talk a little bit more about where this goes after the jump.
Absolutely. Guys, we have so much to cover. It's going to be a fantastic show. If you guys are enjoying it so far, make sure to smash that like button. Really, really helps with the algos. But before we jump into it, I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor, the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack, bitcoinwell.com. To get started, you scan the QR code on your screen. It'll take you directly to bitcoinwell.com/simply. You put in your email address. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to get signed up. And bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin. If you're a higher net worth individual looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, you have to check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC. You're going to have a dedicated account representative that you can call or text anytime you want to buy or sell Bitcoin. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC today. All right, everybody, let's get to the numbers. We have tons to talk about. We're going to be right back in just a second. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stamp Seed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure?
Are your seed words really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on StampSeed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to stampseed.com today.
All right, everybody. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $113,440. You have an opportunity to buy Bitcoin at a discount right now. You got to stack that dip. The block height is 908,755 sats per dollar, 882. Market cap 2.26 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap 9.46%. Decline from all-time high. Right now, if you're buying Bitcoin, you're getting at a 8% discount. Realized monetary inflation is 0.84%. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about how the Fed has been acting politically over the last couple of months. We've been saying, listen, Powell's not lowering rates. Operation Choke Point 2.0 was a disaster. Senator Lummis on the Senate floor yesterday was basically saying that the Fed is a black hole. We cannot get information out of them. And even with Freedom of Information Act requests, the Fed is not answering responses. We know that there was claims, and I asked Senator Lummis this when I interviewed her in DC. There were claims that Fed officials, or better said, that officials within the government were destroying documents as it relates to Operation Choke Point 2.0. Simultaneously, we get accused, or Bitcoin gets accused, that it's so-called private money, that we are these shadowy supercoders. I don't know about you guys, but if you can't audit the Fed, if the Fed is not responding to requests by the people, if the Fed is not responding to requests by a United States senator, that sounds super shadowy and super sketchy. And if you compare that to Bitcoin, Bitcoin's an open ledger. You can download the ledger at any time. Anyone could make more Bitcoin by mining it. You can't just make more dollars. Only the Fed has that privilege. So I don't know what sounds more shadowy and sketchy to you between the two systems. And I think this is a classic case of central banker projection. They're projecting onto us what it is they are guilty of themselves. And I think right now, they're not acting in an independent manner. They're acting in a manner that clearly shows that they're politically compromised. So let's check out this clip from the All In podcast.
What's your take on this? The GDP boomed in, 3%, which is pretty great. But is that
problem? No, the problem that Jerome Powell has is that he's trying to smooth it because it allows him to justify his political decision.
Okay.
But the reason why you have to segregate Q1 and Q2, Q1 was before tariffs and Q2 was after tariffs. So I think you have to segregate these two things. And if you look at the run rate from Q2, what you're probably going to see in Q3 and beyond is more similar to Q2, which is to say a large surplus, good GDP expansion, and moderating inflation. So why does the Fed not cut? Because at this point, not cutting is the only thing that you can do to slow the Trump administration down going into the midterms if you wanted to politicize the job. If, however, on the other hand, you just take the data as is and you ignore Q1 because it was pre-tariff and you start to look at Q2 and you project forward, if you inject a 100 basis point cut into the economy, this thing is going to go gangbusters. And Trump is going to look like an economic genius going into 2026.
So, I mean, there you have Chamath, and he's good friends with David Sachs, who's the AI crypto czar, and they actually do that podcast together. And he's saying what Simply Bitcoin has been saying for months now, that the Fed has been acting politically. And I don't think they want to give Trump this win heading into the midterms. The midterms are less than a year and a half away. If they lower rates and markets start to rip, remember, the prediction was that the tariffs were going to destroy the market. They were going to sink everything. The exact opposite happened. There is no reason where inflation is right now and the job numbers are right now and the increase in GDP, there is no reason as to why Powell shouldn't have lowered rates by now. The only reason that I can think of is they don't want to make Trump look good. Because if Trump looks good heading into the midterms, that means, guess what? The pro-Bitcoin party remains in power. And for the supporters of a central bank digital currency, which could be a central bank, you know, has you thinking, man. Anyways, Luke, what's your take on all this, bro? I think it was a great summary by Chamath.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has me thinking a lot. What is actually happening in America? Why won't Powell cut rates? I just get a giggle each week looking at the feud between Trump and Powell. I think we showed you guys earlier in the week. What is it? Trump went down to one of Jerome Powell's buildings, obviously highlighting the gross misallocation of capital that not just the Federal Reserve, but also the government is, you know, being forced to put up with. Okay, I think it's an interesting angle to consider that maybe the Fed is actually acting politically and not based on economics. Again, I think over the next 6 months, 12 months, I think that battle is really going to escalate. Before we jumped on this call today, we were talking about the odds of a Fed rate cut in September. That's now at something like 90%. So if we do finally see rate cuts come out of the Fed, and they're forced to bend the knee to the economic data that Chamath was talking about on that All In podcast, just imagine what Bitcoin's going to do. We haven't even seen the liquidity cycle really kick into full gear yet. Again, we might show some charts in a moment that have a look at how global liquidity moves in these 4-year waves. And it's always when the money supply is expanding the most in these 4-year waves, that's when we see Bitcoin's bull runs typically happen. I think in 2013, global money supply increased by something like 22%. Bitcoin had that massive parabolic run to $1,300. In 2017, 4 years later, I think we saw 26% increases in global money supply. What did Bitcoin do? It ran from 1K to 20K in 9 months. Obviously, 2020, everybody remembers what happened in 2020 and 2021. Global money supply up by 50%. Bitcoin rallied from 10K to 65K really aggressively before that bull run was cut short. And now I think we're just kind of waiting for the global money supply to really increase. It's only moved up, the last time I checked it, by about 5%. So those keeping count at home will know, hang on a minute, this liquidity cycle hasn't even really started yet, and we're already at 120K. What happens when the global money supply hits that 20%, 26%, or even maybe 50% expansion that we're used to seeing? I don't think we're talking about $150,000 Bitcoin. I don't even think we're talking about $250,000 Bitcoin. I don't know where the price is going in the short or the medium term, but I think most people are not ready for what comes when this big print that Larry Lepard is talking about finally arrives. And I just think eventually Powell will be forced to pivot and cut rates. There's a lot of interesting things happening right now with the Dixie index absolutely slumping to like multi-year lows. So again, I'm really interested in what's happening here with the Fed and the central bank. Who knows? Nico, are you smelling a little bit of a money printing wave coming? And what do you think this is going to do to Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just believe in Larry Lepard's thesis on this. Like the big print, it's coming hard, and nothing stops this train. To quote Lynn Alden, right? They're gonna have to print. They can only resist this for so long. Eventually, again, they don't collect enough tax revenue to fund the bill initiatives that Trump has in the big beautiful bill, or just the overall expenditures on a yearly basis that the U.S. government has. I mean, if you do the math, the U.S. government spends $2 trillion more every single year than it collects in tax revenue. To put that into perspective, that's larger than the GDP of most countries, right? So they have to print that difference. They don't have a choice, right? So, again, they're going to print. When they print, obviously that's really, really good for scarce assets, and the scarcest asset is Bitcoin. And again, this was baked into the theory. This was baked into the Genesis block. Satoshi knew this was inevitably going to happen. Bitcoin would not exist if governments were actually responsible with money. But I don't think they can help themselves. But I don't think that there was, and to quote Hayek, right, that very famous video, I don't think that they ever thought that there was going to be this sly roundabout way that was going to pop up out of nowhere, this magic internet money that was going to be able to compete with their money and also simultaneously not be able to be shut down, right? I don't think that they were aware of that. I think that hit them, out of left field, and this is where we're at right now. Anyways, guys, it's going to be an incredible show. We still got the news to cover. And then, of course, we got Luke Mikic joining us on today's show. And we're going to be talking about the power law, diminishing returns, where's the bull market, and what's going to be happening at the end of 2025. What's Luke's perspective on all that? So all of that is yet to come, guys. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back. We're going to hit the news segment.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without having to sell your Bitcoin. They've issued $9 billion in loans to over 10,000 customers since 2018. I absolutely love these guys. Not only do I have an account with them, but I also have a loan. And what I love about them is that there are no monthly payments, and you could pay back the loan at any time. As soon as you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you'll have cash in your account within 24 hours. Over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or sat of customer money. Go to learn.ledin.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones? They don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
All right, everybody, we are back. Guys, go to sat123.com today, and you guys get yourself a Faraday bag. This is where I put my hardware wallets in, ladies and gentlemen, and protect them from EMP attacks, or just, they have these like crazy technologies where like they can like scan the electricity of hardware wallets and stuff. If you put it in a Faraday bag, that's not going to happen. So go to sat123.com/simply today. I think you get like a 15% discount. Nice little discount. Anyways, so I love how they get like a cow from Switzerland. Anyways, the headline is crypto treasuries expand as public companies make bold Monday moves. It goes on to say Monday kicked off with a flurry of treasury announcements as major digital asset firms expand their crypto reserves, underlying the growing institutional embrace of blockchain native assets. Bitmine Immersion Technologies now holds the world's largest shitcoin treasury at $833,000 worth of ETH, or $2.9 billion. Launched just 35 days ago, Bitmine's aggressive ETH acquisition strategy positions it as the largest overall crypto treasury behind Strategy and Mara Holdings, according to the press release. Now, what's really interesting about this is that they're equating, altcoins to Bitcoin, which I find interesting. I don't think they equate. And also, it's basically measuring up, saying like, look, that this company is on par with all these other Bitcoin, with all these other treasury companies. I fundamentally disagree with that. If you look at the value of Ethereum versus Bitcoin, not in dollar terms, I don't think it has made all-time highs in dollar terms. But if you just put Bitcoin to Ethereum, Ethereum has just lost value as it compares to Bitcoin. So I think in the long run, I think it's going to be very short-sighted from that company, Bitmine Immersion Technologies. Anyhow, so a quick update on the Bitcoin treasury companies. Michael Saylor continues to lead the pack by far with 628,000 Bitcoin. Mara is in second place with 50,000 Bitcoin. I think Jack Mahler's SoftBank and Tether's company, 21, holds 43,000 Bitcoin. And then I think this is David Bailey's, I don't know, Bitcoin Standard Treasury Company goes in with 30,000 Bitcoin. Now, again, something to pay attention to is that President Trump is number 6 on this list. The president of the United States has the 6th largest Bitcoin treasury company. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to pump the F out of Bitcoin. He's going to pump his bags, which is going to pump your bags. It's fantastic. I mean, you could have never have imagined this in a million years. Last year, we thought we were going to get, we thought this whole industry was going to get banned. Now, the president of the United States has the 6th largest Bitcoin treasury company in the world. Trump owns 50% of this company, by the way, and it has his name, Trump Media and Technology Group Corp. So it's very, very interesting. Last thing I want to touch on, I want to get Luke's thoughts, is this Bloomberg article. Michael Saylor's strategy makes its 3rd largest Bitcoin purchase ever. Michael Saylor's Bitcoin juggernaut is at it again, buying near the highs with the kind of capital markets firepower no other crypto firm can match. Strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy, disclosed Monday that it bought $2.46 billion of Bitcoin in the past week, its 3rd largest purchase by dollar value since it began accumulating the cryptocurrency 5 years ago. The company acquired 21,000 Bitcoin between July 28th and August 3rd, pushing its total holdings to 628,000 Bitcoin, according to a filing with the SEC. This takes the value of the company's Bitcoin holdings to more than $71 billion at current prices. If Bitcoin 10x's, I don't think it's an if, I think it's a matter of when Bitcoin 10x's, that's $710 billion in Bitcoin, dude. That is absolutely wild. Michael Saylor has first mover advantage. I don't think anyone is going to be able to catch up to this. Every time people are going to want to buy Bitcoin or try to match that, the price of Bitcoin is going to go up. I mean, 628,000 Bitcoin. That's more Bitcoin that's been mined in like last couple years, man. Like he's gobbling up all the supply. The question that I have for you, Luke, is why in the hell is the price not going up? Like they're buying all this Bitcoin, whether it's governments, whether it's these companies, they're just gobbling up left and right. And it seems like the Bitcoin price has literally gone sideways for the last 7 months. Luke.
Yes, I think the big boys getting into the Bitcoin space today, I think they're accumulating Bitcoin in a far more methodical manner than the previous participants in a bull run would do, okay? Think back to 2013 and 2017. The reason why we had these big parabolic spikes was because retail just chases the green days. Retail would turn a 10% day in Bitcoin into a 20% day tomorrow, and then the day after they're going to see the big plus 20%, green day of Bitcoin, and they're just going to keep chasing it higher and higher and higher. Okay, the big boys who are dominating the market today, they're not like retail. These guys are very methodically buying Bitcoin, they're dollar cost averaging, they're buying on the days when Bitcoin is low, and they're averaging into their position. And they're trying to buy as much Bitcoin at a low price as they possibly can. And they're just going to ride this thing up. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. They're going to continue buying Bitcoin on the dip, methodically DCAing into Bitcoin. I think it's really interesting, that article you brought up, Michael Saylor just made his 3rd biggest buy ever. Again, this guy has been buying Bitcoin for literally 5 years now. We'd actually be coming up on the 5-year anniversary very soon, August 2025, and he just made his 3rd biggest buy ever. I think this is huge. I think this is massive. Why is the price of Bitcoin not ripping? I think we're kind of seeing a little bit of a difference in what we're seeing this cycle. I think that because the dominant player in the market is being a lot more methodical with their buys, I don't think we'll see the parabola happen at the same time of the cycle that we're used to seeing it previously.
Oh,
I
that's
think
interesting.
it's going to be later. It's going to be much later because we don't have retail yet. That's my take. What are your thoughts on that, Nico?
Do you think retail is even going to come back?
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get retail. I think we will get retail. I find it really interesting that I think the meta this cycle is going to be Bitcoin treasury companies. We're already seeing this now. People will start a Twitter account 2 weeks ago. They start typing away and talking about, Bitcoin treasury stocks and all of this, 500% yield gains by buying MSTY, and they blow their Twitter account up to 50,000 followers in a week. So I think the new kind of narrative and meta is this idea of Bitcoin treasury companies and, the yield you can get by buying these treasury companies. And a lot of people are framing these treasury companies as these penny stock equivalents in the Bitcoin space. So I think retail is going to chase the treasury company stocks. And what I find really interesting is when retail chases these stocks, stock price goes up. And guess what this does? This allows the treasury company to accumulate more Bitcoin. And again, this is going to be, I think, a feedback loop that feeds on itself. And I think we're going to see a lot of retail buy spot Bitcoin. Don't get me wrong, we're going to see that. But I think we're going to see a lot of retail that would otherwise be buying NFTs or ICOs in 2017. I think these guys are probably going to be buying the Bitcoin treasury company stocks this year. And I think this will create that parabola. I just think it's going to happen a little bit later because all of this capital that's being pushed into Bitcoin treasury stocks, these guys like Metaplanet or MicroStrategy, they're not saying, okay, I raised $1 billion, I'm buying $1 billion of Bitcoin with a smash buy. It's very different. They're taking the capital from retail, this frenzy capital, and they're slowly and methodically averaging into Bitcoin to try to buy Bitcoin at the best price possible. So yes, we're still going to get the parabola, but I think this cycle is going to be a little bit delayed just purely because of that mechanism.
Yeah, I've heard that before. The extended cycle into 2026. So you believe in that theory? Is that correct?
I do, and I don't believe in that theory because of all of these stupid models that people have. I saw an interesting model recently. It was the pi cycle top indicator. This thing like perfectly nailed the top in both tops in 2013, 2017, and 2021. I saw this recently. It was projecting and forecasting a Bitcoin top in January of 2027. This kind of operates and projects based on the moving averages. So it can kind of predict when Bitcoin's getting really overheated, that short-term moving average starts spiking and it starts pulling away from that long-term moving average. I find it interesting that models like that have been so, predictable recently, but I think that kind of thing reflects Bitcoin's price action. We're not seeing these massive gaps up. Bitcoin's methodically increasing and stair-stepping in price and in value. And I just think the top for Bitcoin is, it's 2026, it's 2027. It's not because of all these fancy models and lines on charts that people are drawing. I think it's purely because the fundamentals have completely shifted, and we're in a bull run that we've never seen before. We've never seen coins on exchanges decrease, and we've never seen the billionaires and public companies do what they're doing today.
Give some horns for that. Guys, if you guys are enjoying the show so far, I do want to give a shout out to the live stream. 1,500 of you guys watching live on X, 415 of you guys watching live on YouTube, and 212 watching live on Rumble. If you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we are providing you value. I'm hosting today, and of course, my legendary co-host, I have to come up with the nickname for Luke. The best Bitcoin YouTuber in the game, Luke Mikic in the co-host seat. Guys, we're going to be right back. We're going to hit the culture segment. We're going to be right back in just a second. I just gave you Opti's nickname. Can't do that. You gotta get your own nickname, Luke. All right.
I just call myself Poor Man's Opti. That's my name when I get into these streams.
We're going to be right back in just a sec.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technology. Why HIVE in 2025? Unstoppable growth. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's position to quadruple their global footprint, making them one of the world's fastest growing miners in 2025. And with elite operations that consistently top the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash, HIVE's now headquartered in the USA. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable Bitcoin mining. You can catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com. I want to give a shout out to our partner, bitcoinben.io. If you're into freedom, Bitcoin, and building a real community, this is for you. Gain exclusive access to real-world, members-only, private clubs across the globe, featuring poker nights, expert-led classes, co-working spaces, educational meetups, live events, and more. Current locations include Sarasota, Nashville, Boston, Dallas, Las Vegas, and St. Louis, with new clubs launching soon in West Palm Beach, Scottsdale, Alabama, and beyond. Not to mention Bitcoin Ben's resorts in El Salvador. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. You'll also get access to the first fully backed Bitcoin bank with fiat ramps and savings accounts. It's called Private Key Bank, and you guessed it, it's based out of El Salvador. Go peer-to-peer with Bitcoin bulk buys, tap into home equity for long-term Bitcoin growth, and join their exclusive mining pools if you're interested in mining. What are you waiting for? Head over to bitcoinben.io, join today, where Bitcoin meets freedom.
All right, everybody, we are back, and we got Luke Mikic in the house. There's a couple topics. Oh, it seems like we got a super chat. Do want to give a shout out to who that person was. I'm scrolling. I found it here. SEC breaking news. I appreciate the $2 BitTunes. So, anyways, we do have Luke Mikic in the house, and Luke, there's a couple topics that that trigger you, brother, in a good way. And what I will say is, what do you think about the power law?
Power law. Don't even get me started on the power law. I brought up a chart. It's a different chart. It's not the power law chart, but I kind of feel the same way about this chart as I do the power law. I just think a lot of people are really setting themselves up for danger, this Bitcoin bull run. A lot of people think that we can model what happened in 2013, 2017, 2021, and just project that forward into the future. I just think a lot of people are probably planning to sell Bitcoin far too soon, this bull run, purely because they're using faulty data. And I just think the power law uses faulty data. I just think taking the data from 2008 to 2020 and extrapolating that forwards, I just think it's incredibly dangerous, because I just don't think that we're going to be seeing diminishing returns every single Bitcoin bull run. And that is what the power law is projecting. It's using data from that 08, 2020 era where the number of Bitcoin on exchanges only rose and there was no demand from billionaires, public companies, nation states, pension funds, and all of the big capital allocators that actually matter, like BlackRock. And we're taking this data and we're projecting it forwards. It makes zero sense. It makes zero logic. Based on this logic, these people are saying that it's going to take another 15 years for Bitcoin to climb to a $5 trillion market cap asset, because it's taken us 15 or 16 years to get to 2.5 trillion, where we are today. So based on this model and this data, that would mean that for diminishing returns to be correct, Bitcoin's going to take like what, 45 more years to get to a $10 trillion market cap? That's ridiculous. That's, I think, idiotic. I don't think diminishing returns has any logic to it. I also don't think the power law has any logic to it. I've already disproved, actually, on Twitter, the power law has already failed for like 3 billion people. What about the 200 million people in Nigeria? Well, the Nigerian Naira, the Bitcoin price in Nigerian Naira, that doesn't follow a power law. What about Pakistan? Doesn't follow a power law. What about the people living in Turkey? 85 million of them. We're not just talking about little small Zimbabwe with hyperinflated dollars. 85 million people in Turkey would have gotten absolutely wrecked if they sold their Bitcoin based on a power law. And this is what I think is just really dangerous. I expect the large majority of fiat currencies to continue doing what they've done over the past 5 years, and that's collapse. Again, Argentina, 45 million people who would have gotten wrecked if they had listened to the power law, because they would have sold Bitcoin because of some stupid line on a chart, and Bitcoin has exploded higher. So I just don't think the power law has any validity. I don't think it should be traded on. I don't think it should be listened to. I just think it's using faulty data, and I just think all models are going to get broken to the upside, and people listening to this data, they're going to get wrecked, and they're going to sell their Bitcoin far too soon. So that's kind of what I think about the data and that power law, and I just think it's a matter of time before it fails. Now, again, I'm not saying that it's impossible that Bitcoin doesn't top at $200,000 this cycle. Again, I don't have the hubris to say I have a monopoly on the truth. You have to follow my data because it's backed by math and science and I have a PhD. I'm not saying that. Sure, there's a 10% chance Bitcoin's already topped. Maybe there's a 10% chance Bitcoin does top at 150 or 200K like the power law predicts. And I have to put up and listen to that horrendous narrative for another 5 years before being proven right. That's a possibility, but I just think in the long term, it will be broken.
Yeah, I agree with that, by the way. Just I'm more on the kind of S-curve adoption type of route. I don't believe in this. I think eventually, like just look at all the things that have fallen into place. Oh, we also got a super chat from Ron. Ron, appreciate the $10. Throw pillow on Opti new cow. Thank you, Ron. But yeah, so the way that I'm looking at it, Luke, is like if you look at the geopolitical situation of Bitcoin, right? You have the basically the embracement of Bitcoin by the Treasury Secretary, by President Trump. President Trump literally has the 6th largest Bitcoin treasury company. You have the overwhelming success of MicroStrategy in the U.S. capital markets. You have Bitcoin treasury companies popping up left, right, everywhere, right? And this is just beginning. That does not signal to me that we are reaching near a top, because all of it, listen, I'll put it to you this way. Very simple, guys. When Trump was inaugurated, the Bitcoin price was 109,000. The Bitcoin price currently is at 113,000. Did the fundamentals of Bitcoin improve since Bitcoin was at 109,000. The fundamentals today are stronger than what they were back then. From a hash rate perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a Wall Street institutional perspective, everything is just stronger. So it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense for us to just quietly, top out. And another thing that I'll say too, and I think it was British Hodl that I heard say this, right? We're not in a bull market. I don't think we have been in the bull market for the last 7 months. How could you say we're in a bull market if we go from 109 to 113? Okay, to be fair, we went up to 122, 123, but from 109 to 122 in 7 months, that's not bull market territory. So I don't think we've even started yet. I don't think the run-up has started. I think the more we go sideways, and I think this is the good news, the stronger the base is when we eventually launch. When there's a blast off, the base is much stronger on these foundational levels, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's good news overall, I would say. And yeah, I agree with you 100%, Luke. I think we're just getting started. I don't think we've topped. It just doesn't make sense. And I think the next 6 months are going to be life-changing for a lot of people. And I would just say, sit back, enjoy the ride. And I think Bitcoin's going to do what it's always has done.
I agree. I think for me, the predictability of what Bitcoin's going to do in the medium term, I'm getting more and more concerned, and I'm getting personally more and more unable in my projections to have any idea of what's going to happen. To simplify that, I just don't know tomorrow if I wake up and Bitcoin's at $60,000 or $600,000. I have no idea. And I'm genuinely preparing myself for either situation. And again, a lot of people will hear that and they'll think that's impossible. Bitcoin couldn't crash 50% overnight, but it's done already. We did that in 2020. That was just 5 years ago. And Bitcoin was at the time $8,000 or $9,000 a coin. And again, I just think people would say, oh, it's impossible that Bitcoin moons to $600,000 overnight. I would just challenge that idea. I don't think so. I think it's getting more and more likely by the day. And the fewer Bitcoin that sits on the exchanges, I think that is only going to increase the probability that we see something like an Omega candle. Like I think Samson Mow will eventually be correct on. I think it's a great concept. I think it's a great theory. And I think something like that is actually far more likely to happen before 2030 than the power law survives from today in 2025 to 2030. That's how I'm thinking about what's next.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, guys, appreciate you tuning in for August 5th, 2025. I'm your host, Nico. My co-host today, most bullish, best Bitcoin content creator in the game, Luke Mikic. Go give him a follow. Guys, if you guys enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're going to see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live. Until then, peace out, guys.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.